numbering these at the moment?
Well, probably just forget and stop even saying the episode as we go along.
Well, what might be handy is to work out what episode this is coming out.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Well,
we keep having to do this stupid backwards math.
Whatever number episode is releasing this week.
That doesn't help us.
Yeah, no, not even slightly. But yeah, so one thing that immediately strikes me as something that I have an interest in as far as D&D goes is illusions in 5th edition, right?
Illusions, Michael.
Yeah, so tricks are for kids. But is that they don't use spell saving throws.
Yeah, that's true. Like, a lot of illusions don't do... Because it used to be... The cardinal saving throws used to be Fortitude, Will, and...
Reflex Save?
Reflex Save. Why did I
How
forget
did you forget that one?
Which... Let's just breeze past it.
Don't worry, folks, it's a bit.
Which sort of governed the sort of... Like, the Will just governed all your mental stats, basically, at once.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't really derived from a stat specifically sometimes.
Well, in like older editions, you had like saving throws were really weird.
Yeah.
And there was like roll to save versus like death, or versus like breath weapon, or versus like rods, because rods were a lot more common. But then 3.5 came along and we had Fortitude, Reflex, and Will, which is probably what a number of people will be familiar with because Pathfinder continues on that tradition. I don't think they do this in Pathfinder, but in 4th edition they had this really nice feature where each saving throw was governed by 2 stats and you chose your best of.
Oh, okay.
So Fortitude was Strength or Con, Reflex was Dex or Int, Will was Wisdom or Charisma.
Oh, really? Okay. Interesting pairing. Like, you'd think the Will would have Wisdom and Intelligence.
No, I think that way makes sense because like the way they describe charisma is like the force of your personality. It's like how much of a persona you have. So someone with a very low charisma can't express themselves, and an inability to express yourself could lead to someone who has an easily who's rather susceptible in a willpower means.
Okay.
Dragons tend to have high charisma, and this D&D flip-flops on this a bit, but charisma doesn't necessarily have anything to do with physical attractiveness. It's got more to do with how persuasive you are, how forceful you can be with your words and your presence.
Yeah. So, I get all that. But how does your big brain forehead help you dodge out of the way faster?
It's reaction time.
Sure.
How quickly... I guess they're going like how quickly you can formulate a plan.
I'm just thinking the big expanse forehead helps me sidestep quicker. That's why you see all the people in professional athletes that need agility. They're also all PhDs.
Well, they also had initiative.
True.
You could base initiative off of Dex or Int.
True. Okay. Well, I'll grant you that, but it seems a spurious connection at best.
But no, it's what it did do is it helps with kind of a problem that that 5th edition has, where 5th edition, well, with some exceptions, but 5th edition tends to have stats that are just better than others, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one great example of this is intelligence. You don't get any bonus really for having a high intelligence unless you are an intcaster, unless you're a wizard or an artificer,
or a Eldritch Knight,
or an arcane trickster.
But even then, you want other stats ahead of your intelligence as well.
Yeah. You probably want, like, obviously your primary stat, but then you know, if you're a frontline fighter, you definitely want Constitution.
So, I know, yeah, okay, so that's true. So, like, dexterity is really important because it can feed into your dexterity saving throw, which is quite common. Your armor also gets affected by it. Your initiative it's one of the few things that affects initiative. So it makes dexterity a very powerful stat overall.
And just feeding back into the whole illusions thing, intelligence saving throws are very rare.
Mm-hmm.
Not even just saving throws, but like requiring someone to make an intelligence check is more likely to be like a knowledge check of do you recognize, do you remember this, which is more than almost any other kind of check can be circumnavigated by being a player and just writing that shit down. Because like sometimes people will be like, oh man, I forgot this thing, this important detail, and your DM can just be like, roll to see if your character remembers, right?
So, the best way to get around that in universe right away is to take the feat. What's it called? There's an intelligence-based feat that gives you perfect recall.
Yeah, perfect recall.
Yeah. So it's just like, now, do you remember about this in the campaign? I don't know, DM, do I?
Perfect recall, and then your DM's, yeah, no.
And your DM's like,
fuck
did
you.
I tell them that? I can't remember.
Well, that feat is a problem for a DM because it suddenly means that they have to take better notes.
Yeah,
so that they can, like, fact check the fucking perfect recall guy.
There's also a component of it's like you always know exactly what time of day it is. And it's just like, look, here's a pro tip for all you players out there. The less you can do to piss off your DM, the better. So if the feat is going to piss your DM off, maybe don't take it. If you make him do more work than he already has to do, or she, if you make them do more work than they already have to do, then you've lost.
Like, intelligence, not a very common saving throw. Do you know what's even less common than an intelligence saving throw?
Just saving throw wise?
No. I mean, monsters having an investigation stat listed on a stat block.
I mean, here's the pro tip. Most monsters don't have any stats listed for any skills. You basically just derive them from their base stats.
Usually they'll have perception as the most common one.
Or stealth, or... The most common ones I've seen are perception, stealth, and...
athletics and acrobatics.
Rarely. Usually it's one of those two, because usually as a monster you're ambushing someone, so stealth, or you're trying to stop being ambushed by the players, so perception. They're like the two, and then everything else is like, as you said, they're just not listed stats, so you're like, okay, what's its base intelligence? That'll be the modifier, which is, I understand it makes creating the monster easier and easier to role play, because it's like less that you have to look up, but it does sort of mean like, well, okay, wouldn't this thing have a buff to X, Y, and Z skill that might help in this circumstance? So, yeah.
Yeah, and usually that's given in the form of, like, advantage, like the keen senses, or like the snow cloak that, like, a leopard might have that gives a camouflage. These are usually, advantage, not like a flat bonus. D&D 5th edition doesn't like flat bonuses.
There's very few flat bonuses in 5th edition. The only one I can think of off the top of my head is cover.
Pass Without a Trace is the one that immediately springs to mind.
Okay. I haven't really played with that one, but yeah, so giving you flat, like, bonuses to rolls.
Pass Without a Trace is one of those ones that that I thought about taking, but if, like, it's kind of funny that we suck at stealth. And Sveta could take it at any time, so...
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what she wants to take. And also, it depends if you think you need it.
So far, we've done alright, and I don't think there's a lot of value in taking a group that is, like, average to crap at stealth and bringing them up to good to average.
True. It also depends on the style of play, right? Like, if you have a rogue in your party, it makes it way easier for your party to keep up with the rogue and not just, like, 'cause sometimes with this, it's like, okay, make a stealth check, Mr. Rogue, because you want to try and ambush this thing. Oh, the paladin's right behind you? Conk, conk, conk. So, yeah, being able to sort of make the party at least a little bit quieter so you don't have to be, like, 100 feet ahead of your party, also useful. So, like, if you've got a couple characters that are good at stealth and just a couple that are bad, then that can also work.
Yeah, particularly with kind of how they encourage like group stealth checks rather than like passing and failing on an individual basis.
That's interesting. Have you used group checks very much? Like, do you know how they work?
Yeah. So there's two ways to do it, and one of those is official. It's like in an actual book, and one of them is like so the one that I did for a while, but I kind of stopped more recently in 5th edition, is they ask you to roll I would ask the players to roll, and then I would be like, take your average rounded up.
Okay.
But that requires a bit of calculation, and technically the other way is a bit faster. But the way the D&D is doing it is just, do 50% or more of the group succeed, then you succeed as a whole.
That's the in-book way.
And I like it. It gives reason for stealthy people to travel with a group because they bring up the average.
Yeah, that's true. I thought for a second the way you said you were going to do it is you calculate everyone's score against everyone's perception score.
Absolutely not.
It'd be a nightmare, but it'd be kind of a funny thing to see.
Yeah. I wanna like minimize work, not maximize it.
Yeah, true. The easiest way to do it is like, okay, this is the party. Do you remember the old way of doing it in Pathfinder 3.5?
No.
It was basically everyone rolls. Did one person fail? You're screwed.
Oh yeah, then
everyone fails.
Which would often lead to stealthy people separating from the non-stealthy people, which leads to the party getting split, which can lead to
horrible death.
Death spirals.
I do find that old rogues and like rangers had better mechanics for separating, not like fully separating from a party, but partially separating from a party and scouting ahead. Whereas like you would like D&D just doesn't have as many tools in the toolbox to do that for those characters.
One thing that I really noticed that there's a big lack of is rogues used to be able to disable magical runes. Like a rogue used to be able to be like, that's a rune. That's the older equivalent of a glyph of warning. Whether that be like an alarm spell or explosive runes or just something that would detonate on contact.
Yeah, because the old skill used to just be called disable device, and you would use it for lock picking as you would use for trap disarm and stuff like that.
And rogue specifically could, obviously because the assumption is that magic is fairly common, you would be a pretty bad thief if you couldn't break into a magical lock.
At higher levels, at least.
Yeah. Well, it was like the difficulty was significantly harder. Like a magically locked lock was like plus 10 the difficulty, or it was like 10 plus spell level, 10 plus spell level plus caster stat for someone's runes or something.
Yeah, and you used to be able to purchase better picks like masterwork or other picks that like had a better chance of picking as well. But I mean, checks back in the day used to be out of this world. Like it wouldn't be uncommon. It's like, okay, I'm level 12. I have a plus 15 to this roll. It's like, all right.
Well, you started with up to 4 skill points at level 1. The average stat was higher as well. People were quite commonly starting with an 18 or even a 20 in a stat.
And you could go over 20 as well.
You didn't have to choose between stat ups and feats.
Yeah, because it would just give you, like, you have a feat at this level, you have a stat at this level. And things like headbands of greater intellect and all that kind of stuff. And, to help you push your... They were like straight bonuses. So the way those kind of headbands and braces and belts work now is like, this sets your score to 19, regardless of what, unless it's higher, regardless of what it is. So they're only really useful. It's really funny because those things are like, you think of a headband of intellect, right? So back in the day, that was like primo gear to get as a wizard, because you'd add plus 2, plus 4, plus 6 to your intelligence stat, which is huge, right?
But
now it just sets it to 19. So unless you're a wizard that's like, I don't want to do my feat. It's like, I don't want to do my feat skill. I don't want to do my advancement up. I want to get some feats. This will help me sort of as a crutch. It can't get to 20, so it can't be a plus 5, but at least it can be a plus 4.
It's they're very useful for hybrid classes.
Yep.
Like a arcane trickster or arcane knight, arcane warrior,
Eldritch
Knight.
Yeah.
Also, the one that just puts your constitution to 19. Good on everyone.
Literally on everyone. Yeah.
Like, nobody doesn't want that.
That's the crazy thing, right? Though, like, it's also, hey, I happen to get this thing of intellect, and no one really needs it as a hybrid class or not as a primary. And just give it to your dumbest guy, and now suddenly he's really smart.
And there is actually, interestingly, there is no Dex version.
No, because the stat is very strong.
And I think they recognize that, hence why there is no, gloves of I forget what they were called, but yeah, the Dex boosting gloves just do not exist in...
Weren't they boots? Or were they gloves? Were they braces?
They might have been braces. I'm pretty sure they were like an arm or a wrist, sort of, like that kind of area. And again, older editions of D&D and Pathfinder that don't use attunement slots.
Yeah,
you just have
stacked magic on top of magic.
But you could only have like 2 rings, and like you could only have like one like hand slot, and
one head slot, or there was like the difference between a helmet slot and a head slot.
And it made some items like ion stones, which didn't take conventional slots, rather valuable.
Yeah.
And again, there was this whole idea of like you could get a lot of magic and stack it all on one person.
Yeah. Well, talking about how they don't do dexterity anymore because it's like a very strong multi-stat, I'm surprised that they even still allow you to do the Constitution one, because literally everyone can make use of it. You know what I mean?
That's always been the case. Constitution has always been this is how much HP you have stat.
Yeah, true, but like it's sort of like, that's what I mean. I'm surprised they didn't just go, yeah, we're not going to do this in this edition as well, you know?
Yeah.
Well, while we're taking magic items out.
It's kind of funny that they split each stat into its own save, but then like strength, intelligence, and charisma saving throws are significantly less common just overall.
Yeah, how do you feel about that? Because that was one of the bigger changes moving between the old ones.
I don't think they did enough. Like, I don't mind it on the face of it, but I think I kind of wish they did more with it, and I also think that just giving every class 2 saves and calling it a day also like isn't great, because like you used to have classes like monks and paladins used to just be good at all saving throws, and while that might be a bit busted with 6 saving throws instead of 3, having some classes that are supposed to be like defensive all-rounders, or some classes that might suffer due to like other lackings in the class, can be made up for with better average stats. So like in 3.5, fighters have just fortitude, which I think was kind of a mistake. Fighter is a very bland class.
In 3.5 or in 5th?
In 3.5. I like fighters in 5th.
Yeah, well, that's one of the, I was going to say, like, I think they did a good job of making a fighter far more interesting to play in 5th, while still giving you, if you basically want to play the same fighter as you used to play, there's an archetype for it, which is kind of emulates the same thing.
But I think it's a mistake to not give fighters like a dex save.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they also get more feats than everyone, which technically means level advancement.
That is true. You can just take the resilience feat to gain the proficiency in the saving throw.
That's also true, yeah. And because you have at least 2 or 3 more feats per character than anyone else, you can sort of spend it on that.
And you still get a stat with that as well, because it's you +1 in a stat, and you gain proficiency in that saving throw.
Yeah, so fighters get to their versatility sort of out of their archetype and things like that as well.
Yeah, it's just I feel like they should pay more, because like half the fighter archetypes are dexterity based.
Yeah, that was an interesting change, right? Like the classic fighter is heavily armored,
high strength.
Yeah, it's strength, maybe sword and board, but even if they're not, like 2-handed weapons. Like very rarely are they a 2-weapon fighter or a duelist, because like a lot of that would be partially a rogue subtype,
or even its own class.
Or even
like
its own class.
3.5 and Pathfinder have a lot of like
unique classes.
Classes that are essentially archetypes in 5th that are entire classes.
Yeah, so I found that like when looking at 5th edition, when I was like looking at playing, I was sort of like stunned when I'm like, oh, you could easily make a dex fighter, and then I was like, hang on, in a lot of situations a dex fighter would actually be far preferable to a strength fighter in like, you know, with the X, Y, and Z archetype.
I had the same thought when I was looking at building like a grappler monk, and it's just like you lose a lot by not having dexterity on a monk and using strength as your damage stat.
That is something that I actually am a little bit disappointed about, is like it's not easy to make a strength-based monk, and monks are like traditionally in D&D, and I guess the way sort of they've been brought into these kind of role-playing game fantasy settings, it's always the dexterous monk. But I think there's something to be said about making a monk-based like brawler, or just like the whole thing is strength, like it's just an out-and-out boxer. Even like it's all technique and all that kind of stuff is still there.
If there's a character in Street Fighter, you should be able to make a monk that copies them.
Pretty much, yeah.
Like,
so
I want my Zangief monk just as much as I want my Ryu monk.
That's what I mean. Like that kind of monk is just as valid as the other one. It's just that the other one gets way more play. Now, as a DM, you can easily homebrew that and just be like, well, the strength stat takes your dex stat for all the things that would normally have been dex, but then you have to say somehow that strength also gives you defense, because their defense is built out of their dex and wisdom.
So what I've done, and I've done this 2 ways. I only actually got to play one of these, but I workshopped another character. And one of them was a barbarian monk cross-class, where I go and I worked with the DM, and I was like, okay, how about I take this cross-class and I use Con plus Wiz for my AC. So I just combine. So rather than taking one or the other, I kind of combine. I'm still only using 2 stats, but and the other one was I played a Dragonborn monk, and I took the scales feat, racial feat that they get.
So they get a good AC off.
So it's 13 plus Dex, and I was just like, because I'm playing a monk, can I make that 13 plus Wisdom instead? And they were like, yeah, sure, go ahead.
But still, like that requires concessions, and like that's why D&D is a thing. But like, it would be nice if that was recognized in some of the official content.
Yeah, and like these things are like concessions that make sense. I don't think I've ever had a reasonable DM who deny me something like that. Particularly seeing as I'm taking like, in one case, a level dip. I mean, it's a good level dip. Barbarian's a good class.
The hard thing as a DM, and this has come up a few times in my DMing as well, is sometimes it's difficult to see all the repercussions by allowing that kind of thing. Some players will push it to the extreme as well and take a big advantage out of what you've given as a concession because it sounded cool, and then you have to like ramp up the difficulty on the entire party, and then it can seem like someone's really outshining everyone else, but so like that's the thing. It's really hard to see, okay, what does this actually change balance-wise? And again, if your players are willing to work with you, you can take that on a level-by-level basis and sort of go, well, this didn't really work this level, let's scale this back and do this. But yeah.
Well, there is also just going for other options of attack. Like, everybody only has 2 saving throws. If you're asking a rogue or a monk to make dex saving throws, you're probably doing something wrong. But if you're asking, a wizard to make a Constitution saving throw, things aren't looking good for him.
Yeah, true. I mean, I'm just saying, it's just hard to see the all ends, I guess, and you really have to just kind of play test them to see what's working. So, like, at the moment, I'm kind of play testing with groups of people, playing with the length of ritual casting, because I don't like the 10-minute requirement and we've talked about this before. I don't know if we've talked about this on this show, what I'm tentatively calling a show. I don't know if we've talked about it, but yeah, ritual casting, it just seems like it's a little bit not quite where I'd want it to be. And so far, with the exception of certain rituals which could be busted and then you sort of make special concessions, changing the ritual cast to a minute doesn't seem to be impacting, because the idea is that they can't be casting combat really, right? A minute, which is 10 rounds, is too long in combat to have a person sit out for.
the way I was looking at it doing it was like ritual spells. I would have it be like, oh, there's a regular cast time and then there's a ritual cast time. So it's not just like a flat 10 minutes, right?
Yeah.
But like a normal spell that has a minute long cast time but has the ritual tag, oh, well, maybe that takes 10 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, true. I mean, this would require going in and to all the ritual spells and making judgment calls and adjusting them. But I agree. I think like the whole ritual casting could have been used to better effect, because I think the idea of cantrips and rituals is for casters to always have some magic on hand, so they don't feel like they're ever in a situation where like, I'm just out of magic and I can't do cool magic stuff because I'm a caster. You know, surely I should be able to do stuff, and sort of cantrips fix a bit of that and rituals do too. But the hard thing, if it's like in the flow of the game, I mean, as a DM you can skip over it, but it's like, I would like to detect magic. Cool, you got 10 minutes, what's everyone else doing? And it sort of brings things to a jarring halt, whereas if you say, and you could just go, alright, 10 minutes, you're done, but then that also has weird implications as well into the timing of how urgent things are supposed to be. If you say it's a minute, 60 seconds is not long out of combat for people to stand around and just wait for you to cast a spell.
Yeah.
So I've been sort of playing around with that, and so far I haven't noticed anything too broken with that.
I think the other thing I'd like to see is a few more spells that have the ritual tag, because the main thing, and I'm pretty sure this is a balance thing, but they basically disappear after 3rd level.
Yeah, and I definitely think they're a balance thing. But I think there should be certainly some more utility spells that do it. I think one of the best utility spells at or after 3rd level is Water Walk from the Druid spell list.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's stuff like, should be like Air Bubble or...
Speaking of the Druid spell list, Plant Growth, in the description of the spell, talks about performing a ritual, and yet the spell doesn't have a ritual tag.
Well, it sounds like they didn't think about that one. But
they didn't care.
Possibly. And it looks like we've come to the end of the show.
Yeah.
Get the fuck out of my car.
Yeah, I was waiting for it. Alright.